Good afternoon. And I'm really sorry to bother those of you who are in heavy conversations, and all of our first timers over there to the National Conference. This is a great opportunity for you to learn about something brand new that we're doing. My name is Mary Jo Gonzalez. I am the Division Director for the Equity, Inclusion, and Social Justice Division. I go with she, her, and hers. And in my time with NASPA, one of the things that we've been moving forward is helping individuals and student affairs professionals move from knowing about issues and understanding issues to actually taking action on them. And so I want to thank you for giving us a little bit of your time to talk about campus accessibility. The NASPA Acts Committee is a part of the Equity, Inclusion, and Social Justice Division, and its goal is to provide outlets for our colleagues to engage in social action as well as civic engagement at the annual conference, frankly, and at other locations. And so we're excited to be hosting these pop-ups, which are information sessions associated with the National Student Affairs Day of Action. Our goal for today is to give you some high-level information about the issues that we're facing, as well as tangible ways for you to be involved and engaged, to be an advocate, which is why you see the SA Advocate hashtag being passed out to you. And in doing that, it's a great way for you to understand and know the issues that we're facing. So now I'd like to turn it over to Terry Hines, who works with NASPA, to talk a little bit about campus accessibility and the issues that our students are facing at our universities.
Thank you, and good afternoon. And again, apologies for interrupting any conversations that were going on. As Mary Jo indicated, my name is Terry Hines. I'm NASPA's Director of Policy, Research, and Advocacy. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm going to take just about 15 minutes of your time this afternoon to give you a little bit of information about campus accessibility and give you some suggestions for what you can do right now from where you are to help make all of our campuses more accessible for all of our students. So a little bit of background, I will be the first to admit that I am not a campus accessibility expert. This is an area that I am still learning more about. So if you are an expert and you have information you want to share with me, please feel free to come find me. I'm happy to learn from you. In terms of campus accessibility, campuses are responsible for ensuring accessible educational spaces according to the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is the ADA, as well as Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 as amended by the Americans with Disabilities Amendments Act. And that's a lot of words, so basically it's Section 504 and the Amendments Act. Students are not required to disclose disability status, but disclosure is required to trigger institutional response. So you may have students on your campus that are disabled that never tell you that they are in need of support or services, but any opportunity that you can use to improve accessibility on your college campus is going to make it easier for those students regardless of whether they disclose. Campus responsibility for accessibility is governed at the federal level by the Departments of Education and Justice. And where this comes into the sort of policy and advocacy space is a couple of examples. The Department of Education Office of Civil Rights is responsible for responding to claims that campuses are not meeting students' accessibility needs. So in last year, the Office of Civil Rights had a case processing change where they said they were no longer going to review cases that were submitted in bulk or where one person submitted a lot of claims for the same kind of thing. Well, some disability advocates would go out to campus websites in particular and look for whether or not their websites were accessible to students with disabilities. And if they weren't, then those advocates would file claims with OCR in order to help the campuses get the information that they would need in order to become more accessible. So this change that OCR made to the processing requirements meant that all of those cases were dismissed because they were considered bulk cases. They did later reverse that decision and those cases have been reinstated, but that was only done after advocates from the higher education community became vocal and talked about and got people to write and contact the department about why it was necessary for those claims to be considered. Most of the conversation around campus accessibility right now is focused on digital accessibility, making sure that the content that's provided for educational materials, making sure that the information that's made available on institutional websites is provided in a way that is accessible to students, regardless of whether they've disclosed or not that they might need accessibility assistance. So there are not currently any standards in federal regulations For digital accessibility, the Department of Justice has continued to say that institutions are still responsible for it, but they refuse to sort of set any standard for what it looks like to be digitally accessible or to provide digital accessibility for students. So one of the tricky parts of this conversation is that institutions of higher education, as government actors, recognize and want to uphold their responsibilities for campus accessibility, but they also know that they have a responsibility to be more like internet service providers than a typical sort of government agency. So if you think about your DMV is a very sort of discrete set of information that they provide. It tends to stay very static. It's controlled through a centralized governing agency. An institution of higher education, your faculty, for instance, don't necessarily go and ask someone for permission or for formatting advice on what they're posting to your website. So the concerns from higher education are related to trying to implement really strict standards for accessibility that they may not be able to enforce or control among the different content providers that contribute to their website and the different types of media. So if you think about if I want to webcast one of my classes because I know that I have students that may be traveling, if I have to think about what it means to caption that in real time, but I don't know how to do that, I don't want to not provide that option for the students that are traveling just because I can't meet that requirement for accessibility. So whether or not it's good that we're sort of sticking on these points, it remains to be seen, but the fact that there are currently no standards that we can say this is what you should be aiming for is problematic for our institutions as well as for our students. So there's a couple of related to that concern about limiting sort of the sharing of scholarly knowledge is recognizing just how much the information age has made it possible for anybody to be a content provider. So anybody can share anything on Facebook, anybody can share anything on YouTube or Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat or any number of social media apps that I could have named that I'm not familiar with, so I don't want to mess them up. And when you have all of those people that are unregulated and able to add all that content, and then you have people who are producing really good scholarly reliable content, and you're going to restrict the scholarly reliable content because it needs to meet these additional requirements for accessibility, there's concerns about what that means in an era of fake news. So we really want to be thoughtful and intentional about setting what those standards and regulations are for campus accessibility so that our campuses can be more accessible, but do so in a way that doesn't artificially restrict the sharing of their scholarly information. So one of the pieces of action that you can take as a student affairs professional right now, no matter where you are, to help make your campus more accessible for students. And again, this is all students. Remember, students don't have to disclose if they need an accommodation. And so you may have many more students that need accommodations or that would benefit from accommodations than you realize on your campus. So you can start conversations with your campus senior leadership. If you are on your campus senior leadership team, bring this up in the President's Council. Talk about your institutional responsibilities for accountability or for campus accessibility. Work to establish a policy and a plan for making your campus more accessible. There are millions of tiny little things, tiny changes, incremental changes that you can make that will make your campus more accessible, that don't have to cost a lot of money, that don't have to be big initiatives. You don't have to do it all at once. You can make incremental changes. You can also talk to your campus IT infrastructure because, as I said, digital access and digital accessibility is a big part of this conversation. So I'm going to read this because I'm going to get it wrong if you don't. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG2 standards, are done by the World Wide Web Consortium. And it's a set of standards that's industry created. It's not a requirement of the federal government. It's not something that higher education has come up with. They're IT industry standards for accessibility that seem to be something that most people think higher education should be able to meet at the AA level. So you can talk to your IT folks and say, are we WCAG level AA standard compliant? And find out where you're not. There's checklists available on the World Wide Web Consortium website. And if you'd like the link for that, we did post the links for all of the resources for all of the pop-ups to the RPI blog this morning. So if you go to naspa.org/RPI, the blog post that was posted this morning has all the links to all the resources that we're referencing. The last thing that you can do right now, and I'm going to particularly talk about this both for people who are here right now, but we're also recording this session, and it will be aired tomorrow with captioning as part of the National Student Affairs Day of Action. So the National Student Affairs Day of Action is a single day when we are encouraging higher education, particularly student affairs professionals, to be engaged with your elected officials. We have sample letters provided on a number of different issues on the National Student Affairs Day of Action website. If you are at the NASPA Annual Conference with us in Los Angeles, there are sample letters that you can fill out. They are available in the NASPA Engagement Lounge, which is where we are now, on the table over here. And one of those letters is, there's two letters actually for Congress, that you can send to your representative or to your senators to encourage them to reach out to their counterparts in the House and the Senate to reintroduce the, I'm going to get the name wrong, Accessible Instructional Materials in Higher Education, or AIM-HIGH Act, reintroduced in this Congress. And the AIM-HIGH Act would create an independent commission that would establish voluntary standards for higher education. So it would be an increment for us to take to get to that level where we have enforceable standards across our field for being accessible to our students in the digital realm. So the AIM-HIGH Act, if you'd like to encourage your representative or your senators to work with their colleagues in the House and the Senate to support that, to get it reintroduced, to co-sponsor it. We have sample letters, again, available on the National Student Affairs Day of Action website, or if you're in Los Angeles with us, at the NASPA table in the Engagement Lounge. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Mary Jo for her to thank you all for your time on behalf of the committee and for your attention. Good to see you.
So I want to thank you again, especially those who are watching us today, for all of the work that you do to help make changes in policy and procedures to make access for our students possible at all of their different universities. And please join us on these conversations on social media using the hashtag #SAAdvocates. It's an important part of the work that we do related to social media, so please make sure that you are putting that hashtag as well. Pop-ups are a great way to get started on your journey as an advocate, but also as a policy and someone who is engaged actively in policy. We will have our next pop-up on immigration and international students tomorrow at 10 a.m. here in the NASPA Engagement Lounge. And don't forget, March 12th is the National Student Affairs Day of Action. There are literally thousands of individuals here in Los Angeles, as well as thousands more student affairs across the country. Imagine the kind of impact that we could have if we reached out to all of our elected officials, local, state, national, in order to advocate for those things that are important to us. So again, check out the National Student Affairs Day of Action information on the NASPA engagement portal, as well as visit our website for you. So NASPA, SA advocates, please, let's move forward and do some great things for our students. Thank you.